think I did this last time I was on. First show ever, I was like, so wait, this is the question? I go now?
Now I start?
All right, great.
Let me take the time to get to know you. We can take our time, I'll wait as long as I have to. Let me take the time to get to know you. We can take our time, this love is still brand new.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Raj Nation Innovations Discover Your Inner Awesome podcast. My name is Rajiv Nathan, aka The Raj Nation. I am your show's host. I'm the founder of Raj Nation Innovation, a hip-hop artist and a yoga instructor. Above all else, I am a storyteller. And I am joined by my co-host, Victoria Cohen, aka Almonds and Asana. No, the nickname VC Money did not stick, but Victoria is the blogging voice behind almondsandasana.com. She's also a yoga instructor and community activist, promoting lifestyle choices that have positive impacts on the world around you. This is Discover Your Inner Awesome, the only show where you get to eavesdrop on conversations with founders, artists, and musicians about the stories, the journeys, the struggles, but most importantly, the questions that help creative thinkers like you and I better understand who we are, what we're doing, and how we can do it better. This is the season premiere of Season 8 of the show, and to kick off Season 8, we are starting the season just like how we started this entire show over 2.5 years ago by welcoming back our first ever guest, Matt Wilson, onto the show. Matt Wilson is a good friend of mine. He is mi amigo, as we like to say with each other. He is the co-founder of Under 30 Experiences, a travel company for young adults which scaled from 4 trips in 2014 to now over 200 trips a year in 2017. And in that growth process, Matt has placed a heavy emphasis on his own health. So, our conversation today is around how do you build a sustainable life? Now, before we dive in and kick off Season 8 officially, I want to welcome you. If you are not a member of our tribe already, come on and join our tribe over at www.discoveryourinnerawesome.com. Enter your email address and you will never miss another episode of the show, as well as all the cool Raj Nation Innovation stories I share through our platform. All right, let's dive in now to our conversation with Matt Wilson, kicking off Season 8, Episode 1, How Do You Build a Sustainable Life? Let's listen in.
I would say that you can just look around and how we're going about our lives and running our country and our world, it's just not sustainable. And I don't just mean in the ecological sense, meaning is this good for the environment, but is this good for ourselves? Are we going to be able to literally sustain the speed at which we are doing things and also the manner in which we are doing things? And so to me, that means a lot about our own health and fitness, the way that we work, the way that we just conduct our lives. And of course, there's lots of crossover into how wasteful we are with all of our plastic and petroleum and all that good stuff. So that's what that means to me.
So, what are some of the things then that you've kind of like the problem is there, right? Like we're not living in a sustainable manner, and I've observed some of the things you've taken on as part of that, like foods you choose to eat, which I'll never agree with you on the no gluten thing.
I mean, read a book. It's in there.
I like bread way too much and carbs. So you've made some like dietary changes.
For sure.
Right. Like right now, I mean, obviously the listeners don't know because this is audio, but you're wearing the blue light dimming sunglasses, or just whatever you call them, just normal glasses.
Yeah, wait, tell me about those, because I just thought they were cool.
Thank you for
but
thinking
apparently
that they
too.
were cool.
And then you called them stupid, so
cool
I don't know.
I mean, they're very stupid. They're $9 glasses from Amazon, and they're UVEX blue light blockers, and the idea is that all these fluorescent lights in here are beaming the strongest spectrum of blue lights into our eyes and onto our skin, all our photoreceptors. And it's telling our bodies that it is noon in the middle of summer, which it basically is right now, but it's only good at this time of the day. It's not good before bed to be having the blue lights flashing into your eyes. It messes with your production of melatonin, which is a hormone that tells you to go to sleep, but also just things we could get totally into. All right, why are we, sorry, I know your blog is named almonds and avocados and asanas, right?
No avocado.
But these things may or may not grow in the Chicagoland area. Most of what we're getting our almonds from is from California and has this terrible problem.
Oh no, don't you know? I pick mine up from California. I bring them back every time.
Okay, that's great.
I'm kidding.
But bringing them here, it's we're eating all these things that are not natural to our body, and there's a big theory in medicine right now that's the reason so many people are getting sick or at least performing more poorly than they otherwise could have, because they have all these blue lights shining into their eyes. And your body, we used to walk around barefoot, and we used to be out in the sun a little bit more and get a little vitamin D once in a while, but now we're just getting blasted by like computer screens and TV screens and iPads and iPhones and all these things. Anyway, to bring it all back together, it's about, is this natural for your body? And that's why I wear the glasses, is to shield myself from these things. Now, these are all new theories that are coming out, and there are scientific studies behind them that support these things. Is this going to save my life? I don't know. But why not wear these quote-unquote stupid glasses and give it a shot? I know that I do sleep better because of them.
Interesting.
So whether it's placebo or not placebo, whatever, if there's studies to support it, I'm going to do it.
Out of curiosity, how do you feel about like really dark room at night versus like if there's little lights on?
Oh, I'm the guy who unscrews the smoke detector.
Okay, full disclosure, we were on our honeymoon. We were in Cambodia, in like a beautiful hotel in Cambodia, and there was this tiny light. My husband knows I'm like crazy. I try to cover every single lighter, at least, and then I like put things over my eyes. I'm like, there can't be a tiny lighter. Like it's so distracting. And literally, I made him call down to order like tape so that I could tape something up over this like light that would not stop going. He's like, "You are so." Oh my gosh! I need that sleep mask.
Much
okay,
better.
do you know? I've tried different sleep masks. I don't like them because I feel like they're like tight. So I take a long sleeve shirt and I take the sleeve of it and I wrap it around.
Wait, have you ever tried this one?
No, but hand it over.
Listeners, Victoria's trying on Matt's sleep.
Oh,
you have it
this is
upside
upside
down,
down.
but you kind of look like Batman.
But
this is nice.
But it also covers
Where'd you
your
get
ears.
this? Oh yes, I love that too.
Yeah, this is
all the
this is
sensory
on Amazon.
things.
It's called the Sleep Master.
Wow, I'm writing that down.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I love. So I just moved into a new apartment where you dropped off your suitcase earlier today when you went to the wrong place.
and now actually exactly on time for our meeting.
Yes, my bad. So it's a garden unit, which means it doesn't get a ton of natural light, which can be bad for the reason of, do I have to have, light bulbs on all the time, but I'm not really there during the day, so whatever. Mm-hmm. But what's awesome about it is the bedroom is pitch black. It's like once I turn off the light, like I cannot see my limbs if I put them in the air.
That's awesome.
Which is
so
amazing.
nice.
And I've noticed, it's only been like a week there now as of this recording. And I'm actually before I was going to bed earlier and more tired when I woke up. Now, like last night I went to bed at 11 and I woke up at like 5:40 today, I think. But I felt good. I didn't feel like I needed to snooze
You had like
for
an
another 30
actual
minutes.
good night of rest, not like waking up. And,
And there's no real because it's in the base, it's underground at that point, right? I don't really hear any sounds, even though the next door neighbor owns a rooster.
Wow.
Which I noticed once I was up.
Sure. Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, and Of course, I go to more extreme measures than I expect most people to do, but I also live in Costa Rica where I can get vitamin D and I can get good UV rays first thing in the morning, at noon. I try to watch the sunset if I can. It gets dark all year round at 6 p.m. And so by 9, I'm pretty bored. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to read my book and go to sleep.
Right.
And then I'm up at 5 or 6 in the morning when it gets light again.
Right.
And that's much more natural to me, and most of what the science is saying right now is we've become so disconnected that it's not sustainable for us anymore.
Yeah. No, I totally see that. Sometimes I get this weird feeling, like when I think about how quickly technology has evolved and like how, just how fast things are moving. I almost like envision the world as if it's like a Tasmanian devil, like everything's like this, and like at some point, like what happens? Is it just like, I don't know.
Sure.
Like sometimes I feel like, gosh, we're just going so fast, like, and things are compounding so quickly that at what point is it just we've worked ourselves out of existence?
Well, and the speed is accelerating with technology, infinite.
Right, that's what I'm saying, just compounding.
So the book I read earlier this year, which I think everyone should read, but particularly our age group should read, is the new it's new as of last year now, but Thomas Friedman, the New York Times columnist and author of The Earth is Flat or whatever, or World is Flat, from about a decade ago or more than that. His newer book is called, it's a really long title. It's like, Thank You for Being Late, an optimist's guide to thriving in the age of accelerations. And what he refers to the current time period as is that we are in an age of acceleration. And the idea is that, the whole thesis is that there are 3 forces that are accelerating at a faster rate than we can keep up with. And for most of the history of the world, they've progressed on a linear path, and now they're hockey sticking. And if it, or you could say like it was an exponential curve always, but it was always the flat part of the curve, and now it's the uptick of it. And the 3 forces are globalization of markets, climate change, and technology, and they all very closely interplay with one another.
Totally.
To create this and I think one of the baseline examples he uses is like, just take the technology piece. He's like, by the time the governments figure out how to regulate Uber, self-driving cars will be a standard, and the regulation won't even matter.
Like a whole industry will have like come and gone, and no one will have even had time to regulate.
I thought, and the reason why I think everyone in our age group should read it is because I actually have a decent understanding of how the world works now, and operates with one another. I'm
gonna write that down.
Yeah, it's a kind of a tough read for the fact that it just
heavy.
Goes into some deep stuff that if you're not already really familiar with it, you've got to sit and think about the scientific nature of climate change and that kind of stuff. But another example would be the uprisings in Egypt from 6-7 years ago. Really, when you look at, I'm going to butcher the story a little bit, but when you look at what that was the result of, was you had land drying up that was where the soil was fertile before, but now it's arid because of climate changing. Well, at the same time, the Egyptian government can get bread from another country for cheaper than they can grow it in Egypt. So you've got the government, you've got climate change affecting, you've got globalization of markets now coming into that. And then what mobilized them to uprise against the government was they could use technology. And one of the biggest catalysts was the government shot down someone, I can't remember what his name was, and then someone created a We Are All So-and-so Facebook page, which got, I don't know, over 1 million followers in 2 days or less. And then that sparked the revolution.
Yeah.
That's climate change, it's globalization of markets and technology all closely relating to each other to make one event happen. And while that's an extreme event, those kinds of things are happening on a smaller scale every day, and it's accelerating faster than we can keep up with.
Just wait until all these little island nations are underwater. That's going to be a huge issue.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Absolutely.
So, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I, just on the sustainability, it fits into all this. So I with my blog, I told you I'm like trying to understand a little bit more about like sustainable eating. So I'm not a vegetarian or a vegan, but I'm trying to make more conscious choices and buying fish that's just, sustainable and like really, really trying to look into things the best that I can. Definitely not perfect, but working on it. So one thing though is that earlier this year I watched the Leonardo DiCaprio Before the Flood, I think it's called, right? His documentary, his climate change documentary is really good, but also very scary, as they all are. And one of the people in it was like, one of the biggest things people could do, that's just the easiest step, is to just cut out red meat. Like it's just, it's not even for like your body or for physical reasons or health reasons, but just they're so bad for the environment. They're just such an absolute waste. And so I decided I don't cook red meat at all anymore, and I pretty much always try to choose something else when I'm out. Like occasionally I'll eat it, but very occasionally now. And I happened to read an article earlier today that I shared in my Instagram stories that was basically like, if every person, I think the article was something like, if everyone switched beef for, beef and beans, like what the impact would be. And it was like, they estimate that we could reach 46 to 74% of our emission reduction goals if that was the one change everyone made. And the whole point of the article was like, okay, even if we still like ate chicken, ate eggs, ate fish, like even eat pork, but if you just cut cows out of it, like it's one really small thing that's just not that big of a deal that, you could make this big impact. And so the beginning of the article was saying there's now this like new category of anxiety that's called eco-anxiety, and it's people feeling like climate change is real. What
people
can I
feeling
do?
like climate
No.
or the fact that climate change
No. I'm saying this is the overall feeling. People are like, climate change is real, but the feeling is like, but I can't do anything. Like, I guess I'll turn my lights off. I'll like, take shorter showers, all these things. And the article was like, this is a real thing that people are having this eco-anxiety. And sure, those other things are great, but like when they've actually started to do these studies, the number one thing people could do that would actually make a true impact is to just stop eating red meat, which I think is just super cool and crazy.
No, I think it's really interesting, and what I was happy to hear about Thomas Friedman's book is it's the optimist's guide.
Mm-hmm.
The second half of the book is like, so what do we do about it? The first half, you're like, oh, we're fucked.
Right. That's like a lot of these climate change movies are so scary.
Sure. And so unfortunately, I walk around the world, and I am a bit of a, what was the term you called?
Eco-anxiety.
Yeah.
You've got eco-anxiety.
Or I have, not anxiety about the foods that I eat, but
you're really conscious.
Yeah, I don't want to walk around the world and see all of the things that are going wrong, all of the bad things. And that's something that I struggle with internally all of the time, and trying to say, okay, well, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. I want to lead by example. Hopefully, other people can. The listener, if the listeners haven't heard, it's about the methane gases that literally it's the cows.
Yeah.
Can I say S8E1?
Yeah. Say whatever word you want to say.
Wow.
Yeah.
The cows shit.
Yeah.
And the methane gases that are going into the ozone layer, and also the incredible amount of water that goes that these cows use. And so anyway, it's just this huge problem with eating red meat. But I don't want to walk around the world and just be like, I get in a bad mood every time I walk by McDonald's and see obese people hanging out outside who don't really know any better, / they're kind of addicted, / it's really bad. It's a lot more complicated than just judging these people. And so, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And I think there's something that can be judged in every perspective, right? Like, while you're like not going to eat gluten, right? Someone could be like, well, you eat meat. I think you still do, right?
Yeah, I eat meat when it's around. I don't buy meat to cook it at home, but I mainly eat fish. I eat fish every day.
Yeah. So there's all these little like nuances of like, okay, well, one person can choose to live like this, which is different than how that person lives, and so on and so forth. So there's always different ways to live. So then with that in mind, what is it that, like, how do we just get along?
Well, it's hard. And how do you get along with yourself?
Yeah.
Right? Because here I am drinking Fijian water from Fiji, and the reason that I bought it
in a
this
plastic bottle
is because I know it's the best water that I can possibly put into myself, and if I want to come on a podcast, I don't want to be drinking fluorinated water that is shitty for me.
Wait, the normal water that's bottled is bad?
Tap water, right? Okay, it doesn't have to come from Fiji, but
Okay.
this is highly rated.
Yeah.
San Pellegrino.
Amazon said it was good.
Yeah. No, it's if you look up.
Yeah.
Sure.
We believe you.
But you were saying as
We
opposed
believe
to tap
you've
water,
done your
not as opposed
research.
to like
Sure, yeah.
ice mountain water.
Yeah, I could drink the tap water as well, but I know it's not as good for me. And then I internalized, well, I want to come on this podcast and make a positive impact. I want to do that to the best
You want to
of
hold
my
yourself
ability.
accountable for what you're
And
about.
sure, I might have to drink a plastic bottle, but hopefully a few thousand people stop using plastic bottles. And that's the kind of internal struggle that I have personally, and that's what so it's a very uneasy time to be alive and try to live within your values because of globalization. It's all around us. Like, even though I live in Costa Rica in the middle of nowhere, and I try to eat everything from an organic farm that's very close to my house, it's not easy to live a modern lifestyle and still do the right thing.
Totally.
So then, this idea of the sustainable life is something that I think within the startup community is super relevant on even a more micro scale, just in the sense of like, when you're working on a startup, you're working, it's like if you're not working 24 hours, you're not working hard enough. And because a lot of times you've chosen a profession that doesn't pay you, at least right away, you have to make cutbacks in your life, and then opting for the cheaper groceries is the route you kind of just have to go, right?
Yeah, and I did it.
Right, and so what's the path forward then? And maybe we don't really have an answer for the grocery side of things, but at least for the sustainable work life side of things.
Yeah, like how have you made, like I'm curious, I think of what you're getting at is like you obviously live this certain lifestyle that you're trying to strive for being more sustainable, and you live in Costa Rica, which is like, you're not living in Chicago, but you've got this company, and like, so how do you kind of balance that? How do you maintain that? How do you get to that place?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, okay, so I guess if I kind of bring us back, because I've been through this transition of, starting a company and being extremely stressed out and trying to figure out...
Take our listeners down memory lane.
Okay,
Let's go back to the
yeah.
CEO
It's
days.
2017 right now. I started my first business with my co-founder Jared O'Toole in 2009, call it. And this was under 30 CEO. We were a media site for young people trying to start businesses. We published news, advice, interviews, articles, young people to get their ideas off the ground, especially because this was in the midst of the global economic crisis. I graduated in the worst economy since the Great Depression. It was very difficult for people to find jobs. And so there was that, right? And that was a hard time to figure out the internet, right? Even just whatever that is, 8-9 years ago now. It seems like a long time to us because we're young, but in the age of industry, it's like
Nothing.
we're in our infancy still.
If I can cut you off for a
internet.
second,
Yeah,
that's
go ahead.
kind of what Friedman in that book, and why he's like Age of Acceleration, right? Like, he kind of highlights that exact point where he's like, he said 2007 was the jump off year because like that's when iPhone came out. That's when storage capacities like increased tenfold or more than that. And he was saying like, for most of human, he's like, if you lived in the year 1100 and you lived in the year 1200, you would notice virtually zero change in society. But if you lived in the year 2008 and the year 2013, think of all the differences that happened in that 5 year span.
That's insane. That's insane. Okay, quick side story.
Yeah.
I have a friend who was visiting me when I was living in New York, and he came out of the subway and met a guy, and the guy said, "Hey, will you help me? I need to go to this address. Can you figure this out for me?" And my friend takes out his iPhone and he punches in the thing, and the guy looks at him and he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I've been in jail for 10 years.
What?
I don't know what you're doing right now."
Oh my
And
god.
my friend's just like, "Oh yeah, up here 2
The
blocks.
whole world
take
is
a right,
just
you're
completely
good."
changed.
And the guy's mind was just blown. So yeah, real
Wow.
life example.
Look at these rectangles.
Real life example of that. Before the aside, we were going somewhere.
You were saying
your
how,
story,
yeah,
basically.
you started under
Right.
CEO around this
Okay,
time.
so there were bloggers at that time, but there were not a lot of bloggers who were A, making any money at it, or B, doing much in the way of building a community, or we prided ourselves on being some of the very first young entrepreneur bloggers, and we brought other bloggers together who were trying to start businesses, and they wanted to talk to other people about what they were going through. Now it's like, oh, you have medium.com.
Right, you've got
or,
all these different
you have
places.
a
Correct.
billion of them, okay? So, but during that time, I took myself through the ringer of just trying to make it in New York, trying to make enough money, yet dealing with the stress of trying to do that, having no money, eating terrible foods, not sleeping enough, always being connected to Wi-Fi and our computers and our phones, which are emitting terrible radiation coming out of it that is extremely detrimental to our health. And if we're connected to that stuff all the time without seeing the daylight, that's why I started practicing yoga. So Raj, you wanted to get into some actionable things that people could do. In 2010, I decided, okay, you know what? I'm not going to lift so many weights and eat so much chicken packed with antibiotics and hormones. Let me try to at least go to this yoga class at a New York sports club gym and relax a little bit in the middle of the day. And I found that really helped me. And then I started to get into I'm more focused after I do this, and started to get interested in meditation, but I really had no idea what it was. There were no apps out there to teach you in
Headspace didn't
2011.
exist yet.
Exactly. And so I just started going down this rabbit hole into trying to, it was really a rabbit hole of self-discovery, because I knew the person that I was at that time was not who I wanted to be. I was not connected with the things that I loved, which are the outdoors, which are being in nature, doing action sports, outdoor activities, being physical with my body. It was literally just hunched over my computer all of the time with these things resting on my genitals.
Side note, whenever my husband's sitting in the car and he's got his phone, I'm like, take it out, not under your...
Seriously.
We're trying to have kids.
Seriously. I'm like, that's gotta be so bad.
Yeah, and so I went down this, of course, there was yoga, and then there was trying to eat more healthy, and as I started to do this, eventually, I figured things out business-wise a little bit better, where then I was able to make investments in my own health. And now, I feel like I'm any investment that I can make, I am making now as early and often as possible to make up for all of the years that I put myself through hell. Now I'm trying to experiment with things like neurofeedback and hooking up electrodes to my head to measure my brain waves and put myself into more focused and deeper meditative states.
I'd like to see a picture of that.
I'm gonna go to do this training in November
Cool.
in LA and really invest in this stuff, because I know that it's going to make me a better person, a better leader, be able to make more positive impact. But I think it's the same, even though my example is a little bit extreme, it's the same thing. Like, okay, in college, I ate ramen noodles and mac and cheese, and it was, and drank 30 beers every weekend. Like, it was terrible, okay? But as you, of course, grow out of it, but then I developed a hunger to be able to get better, and that's what I would say is the most important thing, is people need to at least want to learn about this or want to make themselves better in some capacity. And that's what the startup community really needs to embrace a little bit more, is that spending so much time, I get it, it's do or die.
Yeah.
But it's do or die in such a superficial,
yes.
You're a startup, it's do or die.
Let's pause 60 seconds for this public service announcement for you startup founders out there listening. The Discover Your Inner Awesome podcast is brought to you by Raj Nation Innovation. If you are not familiar yet with Raj Nation Innovation, let me tell you real quick. I talk to founders pretty much every day who flat out tell me, Raj, we suck at telling our story. Well, my job is to remove the suck. With Raj Nation Innovation, I blend a unique background in both branding and songwriting because, as I'm sure you know if you've been listening to this show, I am also a hip-hop artist. And so I look at business communication through the lens of entertainment and performance. And with that approach, I partner with growth-focused startups to help them develop their pitch, their story, and their message so they can go raise investor capital and acquire their early customers. Companies like FanFood, Keo, Jiffy Rides, Muses, and more have all gone through my signature brand communication playbook and come out on the other side winning pitch competitions, raising seed funding, and being masters of telling their story. Holler at me at www.rajnationinnovation.com. That's rajnationinnovation.com. Back now to the show.
And we've had similar conversations to this. I think, one, I'm thinking a lot about our conversation with Katie when we talked about how do you maintain your hustle. And one of her 5 things was taking care of yourself and health and wellness is so important to just maintaining that hustle to be able to keep going. And her example was a similar thing, but it was a soul cycle. I think she was super into spinning, and she's like, sometimes I get so in my head and so stressed out, and I go and take a class and I get that cardio going and my heart rate going and my head is clear and I can make better decisions at work. So, just really similarly, that is what kind of came to my mind.
Well, I like that you brought up, Matt, the do or die, and you're like, well, that's kind of superficial though. A couple days ago, I was listening to our friend Daniel DiPiazza's podcast, the Rich 20-something podcast, and he had Seth Godin as his guest. I don't know if you've listened to that or not.
I haven't listened to it.
It's a good episode.
I just interviewed Daniel last week.
Nice.
And so he's
it's like the 8th time he's been on your show.
He's a frequent guest on my show, but also, he referenced it, so I'm going to have to listen.
So the Seth Godin, it was great. The interview was great, but one of the things, Seth was just kind of recounting part of his own story and giving advice in the process, and he was saying how, he's like, I was at this point earlier on where it was, how did he phrase it? He was like, I was in a life or death situation with my business. And he's like, but the reality is, he's like, I've been exposed to other cultures now. He's like, I've been in villages in India where if you don't do the work that day, you actually might not eat that night. He's like, and none of us in this business world, he's like, the alternative is we have to get a job. Mm-hmm. That's what the die situation is, and do or die.
Right. And the kind of the punchline of all of that, I know I went on for a while, but it very well may be do or die for the planet. It may be do or die for our own physical bodies and our own health. Right. And we are really, they say burning the candle at both ends. We are doing that on all levels. And that's what sustainability to me is about.
Right. Well, and I look at previous guests on this show who have talked, Aaron Fazulak, co-founder of Designation.io, Joe Parisi, we just had on from Guard Llama, a couple others who they've talked about. They had this moment where they like Aaron mentioned he physically couldn't get out of bed. Joe was like, he had no more adrenaline. Said you have no adrenaline left. If a tiger were in front of you, your fight or flight response wouldn't activate. You wouldn't be able to do anything.
Right. So they get to this point where you are so physically destroying yourself.
And maybe it's you need to bottom out so you can actually change, but what I'm trying to figure out is there a way around getting it to the point where it's so bad that you physically can't function anymore, so therefore you have to make a change? How can it be preempted so that you don't hit that rock bottom physical, mental, emotional moment, and you actually build in some of these sustainable practices into your process?
Well, I think one thing, just because it's the podcast that's out this week as we're recording this, time.
Oh yeah,
it's superly relevant, hugely. Oh yikes. really relevant. Sorry, just thinking about our president's terrible grammar and it's rubbing off on me. No, I'm kidding.
Huge, big.
Yeah,
Gram.
huge. The podcast that's actually out this week while we're recording this is about our relationship with time. And so the guest that we had on
Season 7, episode 9.
Samira Farr, she says she now takes this really active way of viewing time as like she puts a face on it. Like she's in a relationship with time, and she'll, when she comes to something, instead of like answering an email right away, she'll sort of like look to her friend time or her boyfriend time or whatever and say like, is this something you can give? Is this like, what is this relationship? Like, am I abusing you? Are you abusing me? Like, how are we using one another? It was interesting though, right? But so I feel like, and her whole thing was like being, the way I understood it was like being more present. And so I think having that more present mindset and being able to like keep perspective, which is so hard to do. But I think if keeping the perspective that like, okay, it's that whole simple, like in 5 minutes from now, will this be a big deal? And 5 days from now, 5 months from now, 5 years from now, and sort of looking at these things that we get so worked up about. And sometimes the answer is no.
Well, and maybe the startup community will resonate with this a little bit, because I want to do things that are good for the long term, and everyone in the startup community is chasing the short term, whatever they're chasing. You know what I mean? And I get it. Again, it's quote unquote do or die for your business, and you have a certain amount of cash in the bank, and once it's gone, right? That's die. And but if you think about it, I'm thinking, okay, how can I live? If I live longer than anybody listening right now, I'll make more money than that person just from compounded interest. And yeah, that's not like my end game is to make more money than the next person. But if that is a business's end game, right? If it is about in measure of profits, yeah,
the longer you survive, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or if I can invest in something like meditation or going to yoga, that's going to make me be able to zoom out and see the bigger picture in my business. That is totally worth the time, and I don't want anybody in my company giving me shit for stepping out in the middle of the day for a yoga class.
Right. So how did you so it sounds like that first business that you had in 2007-8, the under 30 CEO, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
How did that transition to what you're doing now, and like do you do things differently? And
yes, I mean, okay,
and then how did you get to this like sustainable life? I'm curious of this evolution.
Sure. So of course in New York it was in front of my computer, laptop on the lap, on the genitals.
Genital tops, what they should call them. Not laptops.
Mutilating all of the potential babies.
Right, and it was a lot more work hard, play hard,
right.
Go out and party after, and it didn't make me feel good. And so if anybody's listening and whatever they're doing on a day-to-day basis is not making them feel good,
change it.
That should be a very big red flag. And just because it's accepted in the startup culture doesn't mean that it's okay, doesn't mean that it's right, doesn't mean that it's for you. Be a leader and go out there and say, okay, no, I'm not going to do this. And so I didn't have a breakdown. Yeah, I guess I would have had a bit of a breakdown. And I just kind of closed up shop, and I jammed the laptop in the computer, and I was like, what am I paying over $3,000 a month for this apartment that I'm splitting with this other person? And
we're sharing a bed.
Yeah, exactly. This is just so much. It's just...
Yeah. You hit your point.
Yeah, I was just like, all right, I've had enough of this. I'm going to go and travel. And then I went to see these places like Indonesia, where you can live for very little money, and you see a completely different culture where people do not live like us, and we realize that we have first world problems.
Yeah.
And
so you closed up shop on that business, or you just left it?
No, I took it with me.
Oh, okay.
I put the
in the suitcase,
genital mutilator machine in the backpack, and I took it with me. And yeah, it was to the point where it was
spread it to others.
Yeah, it was to the point where I could pack up the business and work remotely. Okay. I had business partner, but there's just the two of us, or maybe there was three of us, but it was easy. And so I went and I traveled, and that's how I was able to start doing yoga a lot more and focus on that practice. And I was able to learn to surf and speak different languages and experience different cultures. And all of a sudden my mind was opened up. I'm out of this startup bubble, different bubble than they talk about may burst one day, but that I'm out of that little bubble, and all of a sudden I tried to make decisions for myself and really look at things at face value and say, what do I think here? What's the best decision that I want to make, whether it comes to what food I put in my body or weighing the options about what plastics I'm going to use today, all of those things. And it really was a lot about yoga, a lot about meditation, and just a different lifestyle in general, and realizing that we take ourselves so seriously here in the United States, especially in the startup world.
And is that then how Under 30 Experiences came to be?
Yes, and so we ended up spinning off a travel company, and it was originally just spun off for our blog readers, and we said, hey, we had almost 500,000 monthly visitors at that point. We had a really good readership, and we said, well, we have this great community online, let's bring that offline. And so we organized a trip to Iceland, and it went really, really well. And so we said, let's do this more often. And then other people started to ask, well, do I have to be an entrepreneur to come? Do I have to be under 30? And we're like, look, if you're cool, just come, and we'll have a good time, and we'll see how this works out. Yeah, give us your money anyway. And look, so it's called Under 30 Experiences, but it's open to people 21 to 35, and anybody who just wants to connect with others, which was what I was lacking in New York, which seems like such a lonely city, and especially when you're in the startup grind and you can't even really afford office space. That's it. And just entrepreneurship in general, you don't have that company happy hour to keep you happy, keep you entertained, whatever,
engaged,
yeah, exactly. So you guys get the point. So we started this travel community. Now we have trips all over the world, from from Bali to Machu Picchu to Iceland to France and Spain to Costa Rica, where I live now full time, all over the world.
Awesome.
I think that's probably a good segue now to talk about a little bit about Under 30 Experiences. So you just mentioned a little bit about it, but for the listeners who don't know, Under 30 Experiences is a travel company. There are plenty of travel companies, though. Why is this about more than travel, though? And as someone who's taken 2 trips, I know why, but I want our listeners to know too. Sure.
So what I briefly touched on before, we really call ourselves a community. And it's about the people that you experience these places with. We always say, awesome people, awesome places. And we put awesome people first because it's about who you were there with, who you were there to connect with. And it's what modern day life lacks so much. Yes, we are always connected on our devices, but are we really connecting with the people who we are talking to through whatever medium we're choosing for? Are we really present with the people who we're actually spending time with? No, half the time we're on our phones, and that's modern life. I get it, but removing people from their little bubbles and bringing people to a phenomenal place that's going to blow their mind, show them a different culture, another way of living, and we sprinkle in the types of ideas that I'm talking about, but it's not like I have some crazy political agenda there where I'm like, all right, staff, you have to talk about not eating red. There will be no red meat. Okay, we actually are trying to implement no purchasing of plastic water bottles from Under 30 Experiences now. So now if a traveler wants to purchase a plastic water bottle, that's totally fine. We're not going to judge you. This is a non-judgmental community, but we would much prefer to fill up your we ask everyone to bring a sustainable bottle and fill it up at a water cooler. And so through experiencing these things and also just being in the beauty of nature, I mean, you go on our Iceland trip and you get to see the glaciers melting in front of your eyes. hopefully you think a little bit differently the next time you go and make a spending decision.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And the community aspect, I think, is super important because there are a lot of companies or entities who will try and get away with using the word community. And they kind of say it, but it's not really true. But I mean, I've said this probably since day one of taking an under 30 trip is under 30 and bare feet yoga, where we teach, are the only two like things I would say which are like true communities that are businesses. And a lot of it, from my perspective, is because I think like you guys were very intentional out of the gate in terms of like, because originally you had to apply and then there was like a little bit of a screening process, right?
Sure.
And that's some of like the really like business wise, I think those were some really, I think you were very future thinking in having that be the process up front, because what it did was it was like, okay, let's get quality people in, which then made quality people the standard once you scaled and expanded. And now it's not an application. Like now you can just put your credit card in online and go, right?
Sure.
But it's like, who did it scale to?
Right.
Was more quality people.
Right.
And because it's quality people, the trips never end with the experience doesn't end with the trip. I mean, like that Facebook group, I don't know how many people it's at now, but people like love being in that group, right? And like one of the coolest things I can do is say, hey, I'm going to be in whatever state. Who in this community wants to hang out, or like who has a couch I can stay on, right? Like I have like, several like very good friends who I may not have even like gone on a trip with them.
But you met them through
met them through the community outside of the trip. Or like a couple of years ago, like 12 of us organized our own like Lake Tahoe trip, right? And it could have been very easy for the company to be like, you can't organize your own trips within our community, right? But you were like, fuck it, like let's send them a thank you gift is what you did.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's
so
you guys. Cool. If we know that our biggest fans or biggest community members are going to be all in the place at one time, it just so happened that we couldn't make it to the thing. We were running. We were all overseas, but I mean, that's just an amazing testament to that it's an actual community. And last week you ran a yoga class for our community here in Chicago.
Yeah.
So cool.
And tonight we're gonna go to a happy hour event and meet some travelers who we know, who we've been with, meet other people who are thinking about coming on trips, just people who are trying to get out of their little bubble. Not to repeat myself, but that's what it's about.
Well, and I think, and I'd like you to maybe glean or share some advice for our listeners who are founders themselves. You know, like one of the things you'll hear like out of Y Combinator is do things that don't scale. And I feel like they say it, but then like they encourage all these practices that are the exact opposite of what they say. But, you know, that idea of like, let's have interviews with people first over the phone to see if they're good. Like that's something that doesn't scale. Meetups don't scale, yet you're still doing them and the community continues to grow. And that's how this whole like good culture has been created. And it's almost like it's like, you know how like Harvard grads just know like if another Harvard grad applies or a Notre Dame grad applies for a job, this company that they're at, it's like, oh, they're part of Harvard, they're part of Notre Dame, they're in. It's kind of like that same like litmus test, like, oh, part of the under 30 community, chances are I'll probably get along with them kind of thing. What advice do you have then for founders in terms of like intentional growth?
I like the idea of do things that don't scale, because really I think that just means do the right thing. You know, it doesn't have to be Uber, right? That's what these VCs are looking for. But that's the one, that's the home run. It's not even the home run. That's the 1 in a million, 1 in a billion businesses are going to work out the way that Uber has. But by the way, they don't always do the right thing. Okay? So scalability, sure, yeah, we could have come up with the magic app that works, but we knew that doing the right thing was definitely going to work, right? We knew that, and even if it was just 3 of us in a room, that's our community. Okay, well, at least it was a good time. At least we went on a few trips, had some fun, learned some things, can bring that into whatever we do next. But if you're thinking about how you want to build your business, sure, scalability. People say meetups don't scale, but they do. They just, I mean, look at meetup.com, right? that scaled pretty well. It worked out for those guys. And so doing the right thing, I think, is very scalable, but you need to attract the right crowd. And Raj, what you said about our community members who, you know, in startup speak, those are our users or our clients or whomever, even though we don't refer to them that way, our travelers, our community members. We try to attract mindful people or people who are looking for a more mindful experience and want to make a change in their own lives, hopefully become better people in some capacity, and then pay that forward to other people. And if you're in a startup, all right, who's going to take your product, have a positive experience with it, and pay that experience forward to other people in some way? And that positivity spreads. That is scaling. That's word of mouth. And now, you know, this business has been quote unquote scalable. If we brought it to Y Combinator, they would say, oh yeah, this is not a scalable business because it's not an app, right? or whatever. But it is, because people take amazing photos on our trips and put them online, and then everybody asks them, oh my God, who'd you go with? And it's Under 30 Experiences, and we've been able to grow our business really quickly because of this.
Yeah, I mean, what? We were just recapping before we went on air. 2013 was how many trips? Like 5 or 6?
3.
2017, how many trips are you running?
Like close to 200.
Wow.
That's 4 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
How many people a trip? Ish?
Up to 18.
Wow.
That's wow, right? So that's 4 trips every week.
Yeah, up to 20 people.
4 different
or so.
locations have trips every week of the year.
Yeah, and if we
Awesome.
if we can build a community of people who want to do the right thing, or just are a little bit more open-minded to how the rest of the world works, I think that if they can bring that back to their own communities, then we'll be doing the right thing.
You're making an impact.
I mean, I know I can't write that on my business plan and say, what's your plan? And that's to do the right thing. And it's not, and doing the right thing is a objective
Sure.
thing, right? And yeah, you think you're doing
Subjective.
yes, it's very thank you. It's subjective. So you think you're doing the right thing, and then down the line there's some unintended consequences, of course, but that's part of scaling. And if we're going to try to make a positive impact, well, we got to try. So we'll see. Also, one other book that I wanted to bring up was Abundance by Peter Diamandis. He's very optimistic, and he talks about all of the technologies that we can use to be able to solve all of these major problems that we have going on in the world. He talks about urban farming and space exploration and all these things that we could do to combat climate change. But again, those are businesses that have massive potential. All these ideas that he talks about in this book have massive, massive potential. And you know, they have to start somewhere. So hopefully the people in the startup scene want to take on those projects and have meaning to what they do every day.
Where can our listeners learn more about Under 30 Experiences and find you online?
Sure, I would say under30experiences.com if you're interested in becoming part of our community. Of course, you can come on a trip, but you don't have to. You can just come to one of our meetups. They're in most major cities in the United States at this point, and across Canada as well. And yeah, if you want to connect, reach out. Matt at under30experiences.com. Would be happy to.
Awesome. So let's close out then by going one by one and giving our answer. Matt, you're the guest of honor. You'll go last as a result.
I'm so happy that I'm the last.
So our question is, how do you build a sustainable life? Victoria?
Okay, so I think building a sustainable life has to do with keeping your perspective. So knowing when to put an emphasis on things or not to. And I think it's also just about starting to understand what your personal values are and then researching how you can make decisions that support those values. So if you really think the environment's important, then understanding what little things you can do to impact it. If you think that your personal health is important, understanding that, and so I think it's having the perspective of, everything going on around you, but knowing how to make decisions to support your values.
My answers for how do you build a sustainable life. Part of it is, Victoria, you mentioned the episode we did with Samira Farr on our relationship with time, and not to plug our own show here, but I really think that episode pairs nicely with this conversation, like, wine and cheese. And one of the other points she brought up in that episode was like understanding that time does not have to build tension if you don't let it. And the example she gave was like, say you're trying to sign a customer and like this contract has been out for days, and each day that builds you feel more and more tension because you're worried they're going to say no, and then you get into like, well, why don't I discount my services and all this stuff? And it's just like the fact that you're like tension is building is your choice. And if you didn't view it as such, as time not building tension, maybe you'd make different decisions in those moments. Maybe you'd, instead of jumping to a discount, you'd want to have like a different type of conversation with them. But that same thing, that's one example, but that same philosophy could be applied to, I think, particularly in the startup world, we always feel like we're not doing enough, that we're behind. But maybe the pace we're going at is okay, and maybe time is in our favor instead of working against us. As hard as that might be to feel on a day-to-day basis, maybe that is the case. The other thing that I think is really important here is build the practices and habits early on that you want to embody once it gets harder. Because, like you mentioned, Matt, a few minutes ago, like the happy hour kind of thing, right? Like, I go to a lot of networking events in the startup community because I like meeting the people there, not because I like having a beer 4 days a week or whatever. And you know what I do when I go? I drink water. Like, and no one's like laughing at me because I choose to drink water instead of beer. And that's okay, right? Like, and I talk to a lot of people who are like, a lot of people in this startup world who are like, man, now I gotta like plan around that because I'm gonna be drinking that night. And it's like, you don't, like, just because other people are doesn't mean you have to. And because I had made that decision very early on, it's not hard to continue to do. So that's where I say, like, build the habit or whatever. Or like, like waking up before 6 a.m. is not a problem because I've been doing it for 2 years now. And that was an early on habit that I built. Because you don't automatically, like, once you're quote unquote successful or have things working in your favor, you don't automatically be like, all right, well, now I'm going to change everything up, right?
No, it's definitely the opposite.
If anything, you double down on the bad behaviors that were going on before. So that's where I say build it in early. Matt, how do you build a sustainable life?
How do you Oh, man. I won't restate the question at this point. We all know what it is. I think it's about alignment, but first looking inward and deciding what's important to me. Victoria brought up values, and what do you want to dedicate your life to? And it doesn't mean you have to figure out your whole life. Just figure out what you want to dedicate your time to in these 5 minutes or in this hour or this year. It doesn't matter, but time is obviously our most valuable, precious resource that we don't know how to make more of at this point. And so I think if we look inward and we decide what's important to us, then we can start building those sustainable practices and habits that are going to support ourselves in the person who we want to be. And hopefully that person who you want to be is something that you're proud to display to others, to walk in public, to show up at a happy hour and not have to have a beer and not feel like you're at a frat party, right? Because you probably in the right scene. That probably means that you're in the right place at the right time. If you feel comfortable there, being your unique self because you looked inward and you said, what's important to me? And not comparing yourself so much to the world around you and saying, well, I've got to get rich, or I have to make my startup get to this point, and I have to have the pedal down at all times, because it's just not true. You just don't have to do that. You don't have to do anything. And so you can build your life then in a sustainable way, which you're going to be able to succeed in the long term and not just chase the short term all day.
Matt Wilson, you were our guest on episode 1. You are now our guest on what I think is like episode 104 or 5 or something like that.
Wow. It's good to be back. Good to be back. And nice to meet you, Victoria.
You too.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you. We could do a group hug around this conference table.
That wrapped up our conversation with Matt Wilson. Amigo, thank you so much for joining us and spitting some real talk like you always do. Always a pleasure whenever we get the chance to chat, and hopefully we can see each other more often. Did you, the listener, enjoy this episode? If so, the best compliment you can give us is a rating and review on iTunes. Ratings and reviews help more people find the show, therefore more people get to discover their inner awesome. While you're leaving that review, go ahead and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you consume us on, whether that is iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, or the various other podcasting platforms in which you can find this show. For full show notes, references, and resources, as well as Matt and Under 30 Experience's contact information, head to www.discoveryourinnerawesome.com. While you're there, check out our growing archive. We are almost at 100 episodes. I was a little bit off at the end of our conversation with Matt. We're closing in on 100 pretty soon, so check out our full archive at discoveryourinnerawesome.com. Our Season 8 theme song comes to you from the band Sidewalk Chalk off their album An Orchid Is Born. This song that you are hearing right now is called Take the Time. You can find this song and this album on Spotify, iTunes, and at sidewalkchalkmusic.com. That'll do it for this one. Thank you again to Matt Wilson for kicking off Season 8 with us. We got plenty more good stuff on the way for you this season. A lot of good topics, a lot of good guests, a whole lot of awesome. So we will see you next time. But in the meantime, take care and be awesome today.
My baby's sweet, I mean she's sweeter than all outdoors. Love course through my veins and I'm of my